So welcome to the Everyday Heroes podcast. I'm Philip Brady, and I'm joined by hopefully a new friend, Nadia Sayers, who is a mental health educator, worker, and speaker. Nadia was also and is also a professional model and has been for the last 10 years and was Miss Universe Ireland in 2020. But the reason I wanted to have you, Nadia, on the podcast is really from our first conversation at a kind of business networking event recently. I was just amazed at your energy, your passion, but also your willingness to just support and kind of muck in and have conversations that are really important about topics around mental health. So I was so delighted that you said yes. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you for asking me. It's an absolute pleasure. Whenever we had that meeting, it was so clear that I don't really like small talk. Do you know what I mean? I can do it, but why do small talk about the unimportant things whenever you can just get straight in there and talk about the actual problems or else the actual solutions? And you seemed like one of those people, so I was just really excited whenever we actually got a conversation going.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you're here. So maybe just a one-liner on the podcast is we're going to walk through roughly the hero's journey, because what I want to try and show people is that there's people that you could be beside in the queue in Tesco or Sainsbury's who are inspiring to other people. And if we can show you that you could be that kind of hero for other people, well, then people might start living up to that and believe it's possible for themselves. So for anybody listening or watching, just tell us a little bit about you. What are you up to in this chapter of your life and what's going on in your life at the moment?
So at the minute, I feel like I'm kind of coming out of a little bit of a lost time period. So my day job, my primary job is working in mental health early intervention and crisis support, really. So that's my passion. That's always going to be my primary job. That's my purpose. But alongside that, I started into pageantry a while back, and like you said, 2020, I won Miss Universe Ireland and was very lucky to go to travel to the US in the middle of a global pandemic and compete on the Miss Universe stage, which was an absolute dream. And I think once that time period had ended, where that title was then handed over, so many people get to know you as just that title. And you grow so much within that time period as well as a person in so many positive ways. But then once that's gone and once you're out of that time period, you're like, well, what am I doing now? What do I do next? What am I meant to do with this? Because this isn't the be all and end all. You always want it to mean something, but what's my next step now independently outside of management and outside of agencies and all of that sort of stuff? So I'm kind of in that exciting time period now where I'm moving forward and pulling together little projects that are solely mine, that pull together all of my passions, which is obviously like the likes of mental health, but doing it in a creative way. I'm still having a toe in the pageant industry because it is a great community to be in. So yeah, it's kind of that very early incubation period where I'm trying to feel fast to learn my lessons and then move forward.
Nice. And I love that it's a lost period, but also it's exciting because people could get stuck with lost and not give it the description that it's actually the same feeling as exciting.
Yeah. And I think one of the things someone once told me, that whenever you feel terrified, it's not always just fear. There's usually excitement there as well. And that's where all the good things start. Everything good, there's excitement, but there's also fear present because it's the unknown.
Yes. And nerves and excitement are the same feeling in your body. It's just a different label or description. So that's why, it's a cool mix of the two is what makes it a full experience.
Yeah.
So I really like that. So tell me about you and your journey then. So what's this adventure that you think you're being called towards? So what was it that kind of started that journey for you, whether it's the pageantry or it's the kind of mental health space as well? What was it that kind of started that journey that you wanted to kind of walk towards or move towards in your life?
So both of them kind of connected. And I think I didn't see for a long time that they did. I wasn't aware of it at the time. But in hindsight, they connected at different time periods and really fed into each other. So long story shortened a bit. I think whenever I grew up as a teenager, I had the luxury, I suppose, of being quite naive around mental health. I didn't directly know anyone. Obviously I did, but I didn't know about it because people didn't talk about it. but I didn't directly look at the face of anyone with a mental health disorder or poor mental health. I didn't acknowledge that maybe that's something that I was dealing with, when in fact I struggled with an eating disorder through a lot of my teenage years. But at the time, you think it's normal. You think those are normal thought patterns to have. And then whenever I went to university, and that was kind of your first time of independence, where you're standing on your own 2 feet, and I moved away from my family to do that, I think the excitement kept me moving forward, but ultimately you're running on fumes. You're not looking after yourself. I didn't stop to realize you're not okay. And I crashed. So first, second year of university, and going into third year, I really struggled with depression, with anxiety. The eating disorder was kind of kicking in really hard. And I didn't see any of it. I was feeling it, but I didn't understand what was happening. And it got to the stage where I was having suicidal thoughts, and I was in that crisis space. Just before I kind of had hit crisis, when I was still in that kind of going fast, pushing forward, the excitement was feeling you a little bit. I remember I was sitting in my halls, and I'd been doing modeling, dipping my toe in it here and there, and coming from a smaller country town sort of thing, it was a bit weird. People thought it was a bit strange. And I remember someone saying, "Are you not meant to be pretty to do modeling?" And they obviously didn't consider me good enough to be a model. So that was weird for them. Didn't fit into the mold that they wanted me to fit into. So I'd been doing that, stood out a little bit for that as a weirdo. And when I went to university, someone had seen a beauty pageant on Facebook or something, and they had turned around to me and kind of in a joking way had said, "Imagine the state of you if you got up on a stage in a big sparkly dress. You would look ridiculous." Because I was more rock t-shirts, ripped shorts, far too much eyeliner, and they couldn't picture that. So family trait, we're very stubborn. And I decided, right, well then I'll help you see it. And I went to my room and I applied to a pageant, never having seen one, having no understanding of what they were, what to do. But I was like, "You're saying I can't do this, I'm gonna give it a go." So I went off, like it was a disaster. But when I was there, I met some of the most amazing girls. So I really learned a lot about societal issues, about the causes they supported. They were just really friendly and supportive. And to this day, there's three, and now most of them are from England, that I would still talk to on like a bi-weekly basis. And this was when I was 19. This was 9 years ago. We met over a day. And we would still be turning up to support each other whenever we're holding events, or if we just need to talk or to go for lunch. So that was a really positive experience that I tried out, but I kind of left behind me because I was like, I had no idea what was going on there. I can't do that. So moving forward, whenever kind of the mental health started to deteriorate, thankfully, my family and friends noticed, and my friends let my family know. My family took me home and tried to get me help, and you know what it's like trying to get help. The waiting lists are far too long. It can be really ridiculous at times. And I think through that, and through feeling so helpless, through not being able to dress myself in the morning or brush my own teeth, and having my mom have to wash my hair for me because I just couldn't do it, through all of that, and finally getting the help and starting to get better, it was actually the likes of voluntary services that started me down that road of getting help. When I was starting to stand on my own 2 feet and feel better and feel like I was Nadia again, I wanted to actually prevent other people, if I could, from getting that far down that road. So I started volunteering in crisis support, and volunteered to share my story with young people, to show them, look, well, if I walking in here today, you wouldn't have thought that I had depression, because there is that stigma that you don't look like you should be depressed.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show them, yeah, you can't judge a book by its cover. Someone could have depression, someone could be struggling with any sort of array of mental health issues, and you might not know. But if you are, it doesn't mean that you will be forever. It doesn't mean that you can't get a job. It doesn't mean that you can't do things if you're given the right support. So that kind of started my love for the voluntary sector, for mental health work in early intervention. And whilst I was doing it, I was noticing that people are switching off. You do that whenever you see something over and over and over, your brain just glides past it. You don't see it anymore. And it was happening with mental health messages. No one was having these conversations because they weren't entertaining them at all. They were nearly bored of the topic, a topic that we weren't talking enough about anyway. And so I thought, well, let's do it in a different way. Let's try beauty pageants, because people pay attention to you in a beauty pageant. They pay attention to you in a pretty dress, your makeup, your hair, all of that stuff, because it's glamorous and glitzy. But if you can draw their attention with the glam and the glitz, and then hold their attention with the important message and the learning, then and prove you actually care about it, then that could be really powerful for accessing a whole other population of people, and getting a bit of a movement going. So that kind of then started the pageantry thing, even more. Rechecked into that, tried a couple times, failed again, didn't win, wasn't going in to win, but be nice to place sometime. And from there, I just suppose it's just kind of the rest is history. I did more mental health training. I did my master's. I've got into this fantastic job now. Whilst doing that, I applied for Miss Universe Ireland the first year, found out that I grew a lot. I learned a lot. I became more confident, and didn't win, came top 10, and thought in 2020, well, I might as well. It's the last year I can do it. I don't want to regret not applying. And decided at that time, since it was my last year, I was just going to have fun. And I was going to remember why I'm doing it, have a good time. And it worked, and I won, and I was able to talk about like emotional education on a global scale, which was phenomenal. So there's so many ways in which they just kind of connected together, and they can feed into one another. Because pageantry helped me with my confidence, with pageantry helped me fight my eating disorder, which sounds ludicrous, but it did. And my job helped me to stay focused on why I was in pageantry. That makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And like that, you were saying, it nearly feel like yourself again, feel like Nadia again, is the way that you said it, which is profound, because again, we can lose sight of that, or people that are kind of experiencing those kind of episodes, that they think it's who they are, where actually it's not who they are. It's just something that they're experiencing.
Exactly.
And I think that's, it's like there's lots there to unpick. I don't know if I'm clever enough to unpick everything you've just said there. Like, no, it's nothing to apologize about. Like, there's just so much weight there, but there's so much vulnerability and honesty as well. And I think the fact that you use a platform to be able to share a message that people need to hear, and if they're not paying attention, again, you said about kind of mental health, but doing it more creatively, it's to bring that, how can I get in front of eyeballs and people thinking about this stuff with a message that's important and thinking creatively about it? If they're not paying attention in one channel, what are the other channels that we can use and leverage, and absolutely then get attention and focus on these important things? Because people will still experience them whether they're paying attention to it or not, or hearing it too much or not. So it's like, this is an important message. We need to double down on this. We don't need to move away from it.
No, you don't need to move away from what the message is. It's just finding alternative means to appeal to people. It's the same with anything, really, even therapy. You keep using the same method, isn't going to work for everybody. One size does not fit all. So that is why there are so many alternative ways of delivery to try and appeal to different people. It's the same with actually getting the initial message and the hook for the societal issue out there.
Yeah. And when you were so 1920, first, second year in university, in that space, how did you, what was that like then to kind of keep you going? Because that's a brave decision while you're not feeling yourself as well, to kind of move towards that and share that message. How did you navigate? Like, was there ever any doubt or hesitation or like fear or insecurity about like, who am I, or like any of that kind of stuff as part of that?
For trying out pageantry the first time?
Well, pageantry, but also the mix with the mental health stuff, because they're super important. And from where you were to where you got to, and are I'm just putting myself in those shoes. Like, I don't know how I could imagine actually doing that.
I think for one, so whenever I kind of had started to stand up again and feel like I was holding myself together again, and I was in counseling, so I was getting support regularly every week and all of that there to try and navigate treatment and get further up the journey of, feeling like I can just be by myself, I can stand by myself. Whilst I was doing that, I found one way. I've always volunteered. I volunteered in a youth club as a youth leader from the age of 13, and I enjoy it. I enjoyed working in the community. I enjoyed having those conversations and meeting new people and socializing in a really informal way. And I think whenever I had actually contacted the initial organization that I wanted to volunteer for, I remember I went in for a meeting, and basically I didn't know this at the time, but whenever someone's whenever someone's going to volunteer within a mental health charity, especially crisis prevention, you're having to see where they're at in their journey, because so many of the people are there because they've experienced difficulties. And sometimes people jump in head first before dealing with anything, and it's because it's out of the goodness of their heart, but it would do more damage than anything at that stage. So I didn't realize this was the meeting to decide whether I was going to be damaging me or it would be helpful for me. I just went in to meet people, and I went in anyway. I'd done like a bag pack and fundraised for the charity, and I remember walking in and I met this man, and he was looking after all the training for the charity, and I spoke to him and I shared my experience. I'd only really started talking about it openly not too long before, because I was really apprehensive of being so open about it, because I was worried about being judged. I was worried that maybe I wouldn't get modeling jobs in case people thought I was too depressed to turn up on set. Do you know what I mean? And I'd seen another girl that lived not very far from me who did modeling. She was a real amazing girl. She had a newspaper article where she talked about her struggle with OCD and depression. And I read it and I was so in awe of her, and then realized, well, she's still working. She's still getting jobs. She's still herself. So, but this has helped me. So maybe this might help other people. So I started talking about it, spoke to the man about it. His name's Desi. And he straight off the bat said, well, look, I would love to have you involved if you want to volunteer. And I ended up volunteering for them, working very closely with them. I ended up then getting employed by them. And even though I didn't work for that charity now, I work somewhere else. That man is still like my mentor. He was a mentor for me and a role model. And that other level of support that I didn't know I needed, I learned so much from him. And so honestly, I think a big part of it was his support, because that imposter syndrome does kicks in all the time, still kicks in.
Yeah, should.
Oh, completely. And you're standing there being like, who do I think I am talking to these people about mental health? But he kept reminding me, you're not pretending to know everything. You're not an expert. You're not giving all the answers. You're sharing your experience. You're sharing what you've learned. It's not going to work for everybody. But you see, if they ask you something you don't know, you say, I don't know, but I'll try and find out for you.
And this was around volunteering for the crisis kind of response.
Yep. Crisis support and suicide prevention charity. So I would have done early intervention there. I helped them to design and develop suicide prevention programs. And I trained up young people who had had their own experiences on a peer-to-peer basis. So we had a youth team that were going out to speak to youth. Yeah. And then so that's what I did then whenever I was under employment there. And then I went in and started studying for my master's degree in psychology and psychotherapy.
Unbelievable. And you were saying as well, just before this call as well, or just before we press record, about doing the RAP program today. So like the training will never stop either. You'll always be adding tools to the toolbox, which explains some of the books behind me as well. Like it's the same. It's just a desire to want to keep updating that toolbox.
Well, you have to. And I think whenever you, like yourself, whenever your passion and your job and what you want to do is to help people and support people in whatever way you can, things are always changing. Society's always changing. Ways of treatment are always changing, and different perspectives are always coming out. So if you can have a really wide and broad idea of everything that's kind of going on and continue learning, you're seeing that as well, that maybe I can help someone else with that, because again, not one size fits all. So I think the minute you stop learning, you become completely irrelevant. You need to continue learning, and you're not going to have the same opinion though your whole life. You're not going to have the same ideas or perspective your whole life, because things keep changing and you have to keep changing and evolving too.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting, again, if we were to go back to the, so I'm going to talk in a couple of weeks. And
Yep.
what I'm going to talk about is butterflies. I think I was telling you about this and about the evolution of different people. But actually, you go from caterpillar to butterfly. They can only do it once, but we do it multiple times. And again, the learning and the growth, but also the struggle that's part of that journey is what makes us stronger, is what forges our identity.
Yep.
And it makes us a better version of ourselves, and we can grow and we can do better things we never thought were possible for ourselves, as
Yep.
long as we commit to leaning into the struggle of that
Yep.
journey as well, you know?
I call them cheek on the tile moments. Whenever you're
Nice.
having a bad time, you're lying on your floor, you don't know what's happening next. Some of the best ideas or the biggest learnings come out of that cheek on the tile moment. Whenever you think
Nice.
you can't do anything, you don't know what you're doing next, but you allow yourself to feel it,
Yeah,
and
I
it's
love
okay to
that.
feel it as long as you don't feel it forever.
Exactly. And like I go to therapy as well because of my coaching work, and I want to be responsible when I'm in conversations with people that, like, I want to make sure that I'm just as sharp an instrument as I can be. And it's just interesting, some of the stuff like you're saying about reframing the emotions that you feel, that it's not a forever thing. You'll
Yeah.
experience one emotion now and another emotion in a couple of minutes, but we get
Mhm.
stuck in them and we kind of play them out a little bit wider than they need to
Yeah,
be.
like one thing that really stuck out for me, and it's like actually Karen Treisman was talking about it, and she's phenomenal, does a lot of really good work with like children and young people, and it was about anger, because obviously like a lot of people struggle with anger in different ways. So people either struggle because their anger comes out too quickly, it's like an outburst, or sometimes they struggle because they can't show anger. They can't.
Yes.
They've been told they can't. And a lot of females actually I've spoken to feel like they can't show anger, and anger is important. Anger is an emotion you're meant to have. It's how it comes out is the important thing. So she refers to anger as that bodyguard emotion.
Nice.
So anger pops out there, your bodyguard stands in front of you, it's the immediate response, but there's something behind it. The main emotion is behind it that you need to pay attention to and you need to address. The anger is just there to let it out, diffuse it in a healthy way, and then reflect on what the actual emotion is. And that's something
Yes.
that we were teaching all the kids now, because I think it's a really easy visual to use when you're feeling angry, to kind of question, well, am I actually angry, or am I scared or upset or frustrated or just confused?
Yeah, disappointed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I do a 28-day coaching program, and it's kind of like a group coaching program, and one of
Mhm.
the modules is on emotional mastery. And the message more or less is exactly what you've said. There's no good or bad emotions.
Yeah.
There are just emotions. They're information from our bodies that are telling us something. We just have to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I feeling anger? And what's the positive intent behind it? Same with fear. And you say about that kind of fear / excitement. Fear is to prep you for something that you need to be able to perform at. It's a
Uh-huh.
positive intent. I call it self-love. It's to keep you safe, keep you
Yep.
comfortable, but it's a speed bump, not a stop sign. So
Mm-hmm.
again, if you have all of these reframes about emotions, people's lives open up because they don't judge them good or
Yeah.
bad. Like, if I feel anger, then I'm bad. So they make it
Yes.
part of their identity. It's
Yep.
that's not the case.
Anxiety is the same. It's
Anxiety,
a big one that
exactly.
we get all the time. Like, I feel
Yes.
anxious. Well, good.
Yeah.
You're meant to feel anxious sometimes.
Yes.
Yes, there's times when it's an issue and we'll work on that. But anxiety is there to keep you safe. It's there
Yes.
for a reason.
Yes, exactly. And again, they identify with the emotion rather than just seeing it as an emotion that we feel and then it goes
Yes.
away.
Like an indicator, like a light in a car, a warning light in a car.
Nice. I'm writing all these down so that I can use them again. So just I'll like TM Nadia. But you were mentioning about Desi
Yes.
and how he still is like a mentor to you. Are there other
Yeah.
people then that have been that kind of guide on the side as you're
Mhm.
walking on your adventure for you over the last couple of years?
Completely. There've been people in and out, obviously, and for different reasons. Like, I'm very lucky. Desi was the first one I came across. Desi was just very open, understanding. His perspective on life was something I'd never really seen before. It was so non-judgmental and open and practical and realistic. He was the first person that ever said to me, see, if you walk into a meeting and you think it's a talk shop, you just walk out because I trust your judgment. And like to this day, that is my rule. If I walk in somewhere to a meeting and it's a talk shop where they're not actually helping people, they're just talking about it consistently, I'm not going to stay and waste my time. I'm going to go do the practical work instead. But where I work at the moment, obviously Hope for Life, and we do the Uber Heroes program. And I met the CEO and founder, Dee, and my colleague now, Campbell, years ago whenever I worked for this first charity, and was in awe of actually how they worked with young people, how they respected young people, and then obviously what they did with the comic books and how they used real stories in the form of comic books to help inspire young people, let them know they're not alone, and problem solve issues that come up and difficulties in life. But from building a relationship with them, I have learned so much. So I'm so fortunate that I have like now this team of mentors from the professional world, but also the influence and help me in my private life as well. And then obviously friends in and out. For sure, people that I've studied with at university and worked alongside. And although we went different paths, we're still consistently learning off one another. One of my friends, she works within the statutory services directly with children. I obviously work in early intervention, and we're both consistently learning off one another and kind of trying to understand the other side so we have a more full picture of what's available.
That doesn't seem to be happening wider either, where we can learn from that kind of full cycle, because we could be really good early, but actually if downstream it's not working or operating or even talking to each other like that, you're lucky to have a friend where she's placed then, or where they're placed. But it's a system that could do with some thoughtful creativity.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's working at any end right now. One end, there's no support and funding for, there's nothing really in early intervention to help make it work for young people. And I think that's the key issue is it may be there, but what's there is not working for young people. If you listen to them, they will tell you what they need. You just need to actually hear what they're saying.
Yeah.
And then at the other end, they're completely overwhelmed. Crisis support, counseling services, completely overwhelmed. And there's people that are qualified to go into it, but there's not enough money to hire them to go into it, especially for the amount of experience and work that they need to build up first. Because obviously I was going to go into that end of things as well, and it was just it was ridiculous. Some of the hoops I thought, and it didn't suit me either for my private life. So I think that's a struggle for a lot of graduates coming out. They've spent so many years getting different degrees and different levels of degrees and experience in all these different fields to come out and work for very, very little, do very long hours, and have a massive caseload. So they're burning out.
Yeah. And again, supporting others in their mental health, but again, you're burning out to try and actually deliver and do the service and be there for people.
Yeah, there's no longevity.
Yeah. Have you any thoughts about how to fix it?
Loads.
It's not on the sheet of paper I sent you, but yeah, where would you start?
No, I think obviously stuff does come down to money. Do you know what I mean? And I think there needs to be a prioritization on where money is going. Obviously my job is not politics. My job is not numbers either. So I'll admit limited understanding on that side of things. However, if millions of pounds are being spent on statues and sculptures all over the country, can that not be put into actually hiring more people to work at that crisis side of things and helping to put in place more effective mentoring streams and placement streams for people coming up so that they can start earlier to learn the ropes whilst they're studying. And as well, investment in early intervention. We keep waiting until people are at crisis and then trying to play catch up and be reactive, whereas we can be proactive up here and maybe stop people from getting to that crisis stage, help them have a better quality of life, and help them be able to identify earlier when something's not right, when they might need to start looking into a bit more self-care or looking into maybe the likes of CBT. Do you know what I mean? Whenever you're way down a crisis, I personally don't think that's helpful. 6 weeks is not enough.
Yeah.
But if you're starting in the early stages of decline, yeah, fantastic. So it's helping people to become self-aware and know their emotional triggers, understand their emotions better, and be able to communicate those. If we can do that earlier, we can actually use the step care model that's there, as opposed to expecting people to know when they're not well, before they're not well, and how to communicate it whilst they're not well.
Yeah. And again, that early intervention. So whenever you're learning sales and stuff like that for business, you're told sell painkillers, not vitamins. So I don't know how often you take vitamins, but if you have a headache, you're very likely to take a painkiller, right? So it's the same with this. Until it's causing a problem or a pain, well, then we won't do anything about it. But actually, it's going to deteriorate into that system that's not actually reacting quick enough because it's waiting for something to blow up or go really badly wrong, which isn't the right way to think about it. It's like a human predicament
It
in a
is
system.
more expensive. Like short
100%.
term, they think they're saving money. It is more
100%.
expensive to wait till people are at crisis to then have to provide support, as well as the lost lives. Do you know what I mean? Than it is to provide the funding to services. And I know I might sound biased because I work for a service not funded by the government that does early intervention, but there are a good few out there that are doing fantastic work, that already have those relationships within the community. They already have a read on the community and they know the pain points. They know what is working and what doesn't work because they've had years of experience in it. Fund those. Learn from those. Experiential learning will feed so much more effectively in that area than simply just qualifications.
And like you're saying, listening. And I just wrote down listen, but listen early before it gets to the kind of counseling, psychotherapy, psychiatry even. It's a simple skill. We've 2 ears and 1 mouth. In that ratio, we should be using it. It sounds like a little bit earlier to solve a lot of things.
Yeah, and I think one thing that, and it does it, I sound like I'm very angry in this podcast.
No,
I'm actually not an angry person. I'm very
you're
happy
passionate.
person.
It's different. It's passionate.
But
it's different.
I think one thing that is completely ridiculous is that we don't listen to children or young people because their voice is devalued in society. You want an honest answer, you ask a child. I promise you will get one. But their world is just as important to them as our world is to us. Do you know what I mean? And if we actually hear what they're saying, then we'll be able to give something that's effective to them and will actually work, rather than us adults deciding what a 12-year-old needs when we've never been a 12-year-old in 2022.
Yeah. So my next question was going to be on some of the challenges that you've experienced on this adventure. I think we've covered a few already. There's almost systemic. There's just like a desire to want to do more, but probably being limited with some of those kind of challenges that are going on. Would you add anything to that list?
I think just with regards to the kind of early intervention side of things.
Yeah, are you on this adventure of kind of supporting mental health, the modeling, the pageantry, all that kind of stuff? Like there's lots of challenges that you've experienced. We've talked about some of them in the kind of mental health space. Were there others in the other areas, or were there others that you'd highlight as well?
Yeah, I think I always focused on the actual mental health difficulty that I was feeling, and I thought that's the issue. That's the only issue, and that's the whole issue. But in fact, judgment of that was massive.
Yeah.
How people viewed that and view mental health in general, but viewed mental health treatments was a whole other thing. And still is, to be honest. It's something that is getting better, I think, but it is
Yeah.
something that we're having to push really hard to pull away the stigma and the judgment around mental health and mental disorders, and the treatment of those, whether it be talking therapies or medication or one of an array of types of therapies. In all honesty, I was asked a question before: if you could have one wish, what would it be for the whole world? If you could change one thing, and I think it was for people to listen with a more empathetic ear, because if people could listen and come from a place of empathy as opposed to a place of kind of judgment or I want to be right,
Yeah.
a lot of the problems wouldn't become big problems. They'd be a lot easier solved, whether that be stigma around mental health issues, whether that be support that's needed, whether that be just seeing what logically makes sense
Yes.
in the landscape of mental health. I think it would really help.
Yeah.
But do you know what? For me personally, and this is just me personally, I think everything happens for a reason, and I fully believe that I went through those difficult dark times because the learning that I got from that and the empathy that I developed through that is what put me into this career and put me into this position in this job. And it helped me find what I'm passionate about and what my purpose in life is. And I wouldn't take that away for a second. I would not trade any of those dark days for what I'm able to do now and for the young people I'm able to talk to and maybe understand a little bit more than I would have even if I got this job and hadn't experienced any of that.
Yeah. 100%. You won't have been, it's like diamonds are forged under pressure. You won't have been shining as brightly. I know it's so cliche to
I
say it,
wouldn't
but
say
it's
that.
true, right? But it's a good analogy because it's
It
true,
is. It
right?
is.
You're forged under pressure. What is it?
Mhm.
I love this guy, Sadhguru. He has a book called Inner Engineering, a yogi's
Okay.
guide to happiness. I know, a yogi's guide to joy. And what he says is humans are designed like airplanes. We are designed to go against headwinds. So winds coming against them are what help us fly.
Yeah.
But we judge them as bad. I'm bad because I'm experiencing these headwinds. Like, no, that's
Mhm.
life. Use
Yeah.
it to fly higher, not to keep you on the ground. Again,
Yeah.
back to the
Yeah.
butterfly analogy, right? I could keep talking about nature all the time, but so with those challenges and with that kind of sense of judgment, I guess, of how mental health is perceived, but also how you'll be perceived, even experiencing any of those kind of things. What's the thing that keeps you going? So what are you holding in your mind that is like that beacon in the future, or it's something from the past? I use something from the past. I think I shared that with you when we
Mhm.
connected, but what is the thing that you're holding on to,
Mhm.
future or past or wherever, that's keeping you moving forward?
It's actually it's something from the past as well, and it sounds, I suppose, trivial.
Not
Um,
trivial.
but after I won Miss Universe Ireland, I remember I was terrified, like absolutely petrified for about a week. My phone did partially break, but I was terrified to go online as well. So I was using it as a bit of an excuse. But I was terrified to go online because I was like, oh my goodness, who do they think I am? Like who am I meant to be? Who do they need me to be right now?
Yeah.
Because I was so in admiration of the girls that had won before me, and they're phenomenal girls. They're absolutely amazing, and the things that they have done for their community and for the country is insane. But I was like, what am I meant to do? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what my next step was, and um, I remember I'd been asked in advance by a friend of mine to talk to a group of girls at his church, and just over Zoom, because they were going into secondary school and they were struggling with a few things. And he was like, look, I just want you to talk about your experience. They might ask questions. And I'd agreed to do that before winning. So I was doing it anyway. And I went on and I talked to the girls and we talked about body confidence and we talked about social media and we talked about a load of different stuff. And then I got a card in the post from them, and they'd sent me a little thank you card, and it was so lovely. And my friend, I actually had met him in university in my first year, and he had written in the card, "I'm so proud of everything you've done, and it's so nice to see that the girl that I first met in first year is still the girl that's wearing that crown today." And I burst out crying because it reminded me of my why. It reminded me the whole reason I've done this, the whole reason I've done any of this was to shine a spotlight where it needed to be shone, to help to amplify the voices of those people who really need to be heard. Not my voice, their voice. That's what's important. So that kind of drove me forward during that time period. But even now, whenever I'm working, and like sometimes it is a struggle, and sometimes you get kind of things hit you a bit harder than you expect, disclosures or just stories that you're covering, or you talk to people, because people do reach out just to talk, and your heart goes out to them. And the amount of times that people say, "That must be very hard work." Well, it is if you focus on the bad.
Yeah.
But if they're telling you the bad, they're letting it out of their head, and it means that then they can go and get help.
Mm.
Before I had competed in kind of other pageants and I wanted to start talking about mental health on a public forum, I actually wrote a blog post. And I'm not a blogger, I'm not a writer either. But I wrote it all out, never thinking I was actually going to make it public. It was more just for me to get things straight in my head. And anyway, over weeks and weeks, I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to hit publish. And I hit it, and I closed my laptop, and I left my phone at home, and I went for a walk because I was so scared of what people were going to say, whether they'd think I was crazy or think I was attention seeking or think that I was lying. And I came home and I had a lot of messages, but there was one, and this is the one that always keeps me going. Do you know? And this is the one that everything will come back to. If I'm frustrated with funding, if I'm frustrated with like the red tape, if I'm like, oh, you could just go and get a job where you check in and you check out and that's it. The one thing that keeps me going is a friend of mine from primary school, her mum sent me a message to say, "I just read your blog and I showed it to my youngest daughter. We haven't had a real conversation in a while and I've been really worried about her. So I said to her, Nadia posted this thing, do you want to read it?" And she started to cry as she read it. Then she told me everything.
Mm.
And the mum thanked me. And she was saying that that one post or that post helped to bring up a conversation around the tough topics that maybe her daughter didn't know how to approach. So when she read it about someone that she knew, she was able to open up and have that honest conversation with her mum. And people always say if you can help one person, that's it. That's one person.
Yeah.
So if all else fails, something I did, and being honest and vulnerable, started one conversation. So that's done. So there's potential that maybe I can do two. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just going to keep pushing and maybe I can do two.
Yeah. I love that. And again, it doesn't have to be in the future pulling you forward. It can be something that you hold on to
Yeah.
and have like deep in your bones from the past.
Yep.
I was
It's
getting a
so
little bit
comforting.
emotional hearing you say that. So that's why I'm staying quiet as well and not trying not to interrupt. But yeah, it's
No,
powerful.
it does. It pushes me forward. And like I saw that young girl grow up, and I think that helped that I knew her and
Mm.
I'd watched her grow up from she was like really young, and it broke my heart that she was struggling. But at least she talked about it.
Yeah. And that's half the thing is in our mind, it's like a jumble. When you
Mm-hmm.
get it out on paper, somebody I'll think of it in a second. Somebody said to me about my coaching that it like clears the runway ahead of them to move on to where they know what they need to do
Yeah.
next versus the kind of jumble that we hold in our minds. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why, again, I went to coaching rather than just anything else, actually, because I knew that if I could ask questions to help people see things differently in a useful way, well, then I
Mm-hmm.
want to do it for lots of people. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I totally get it. And
That's half the
to
battle.
say not a writer and not a blogger, Nadia, I think you are, and you have to hold that as part of your identity going forward, right?
Ugh. I don't know if I agree with that, but
Not yet. You'll get it. It'll
not
come
yet.
with
But we'll
time.
see. We'll see.
Exactly. So tell me, as you kind of come through this journey, what are some of the lessons that were probably difficult to learn and difficult to kind of add on to your toolbox? But what are some of those kind of lessons that stand out?
Some that I've learned and some that I'm still, you have to remind yourself of because you're always trying to reaffirm with yourself. I do think everything happens for a reason. That's what keeps me going. Even if it's something I don't like, I'll see it someday. I'll see what the reason is someday. Every time you're going to feel, pull something from it because then it's learning. It's not a failure. Sit back, reflect, see what you've learned, hit reset and go again. Because if you really want it, you're going to get it as long as you keep doing that. You keep reflecting on what happened or what you could do differently, resetting and getting rid of any negative emotion around it, and then pushing forward again. And honestly, just be kind. It sounds so simple, and it's something that is so powerful the whole way through any of my careers. I've tried to just be nice to people. Be nice, be kind to them. You don't know what they're going through. Just try and be nice. And I've seen over and over again where it's paid off in ways that I never expected. I have my job now because 4 years ago, I held a door open and I was nice to who is now my current employer, and she noticed. And Miss Universe Ireland, they commented on the fact that I was really nice to my makeup artist and hairdresser and stagehands. And they told the judges the year before, and I didn't win, but they knew about that, and the director remembered. Things like that, you put that goodness and that kindness into the world, it's going to come back tenfold. So no matter what mood you're in, try to just be kind.
One of my mentors says, you cannot outgive the universe.
That's a really good way of looking at it.
That's one of the ones that I hold on to.
Yeah.
But you could do the same with kindness. You can't outgive kindness.
Yeah. And it makes a massive difference. A massive difference. That's why we held our kindness awards in March, and it was strictly for kids and young people to celebrate and be nominated for their kindness. And they had a full ceremony and trophies and prizes, and had their role models hand them their certificates and hand them their plaques.
Nice.
Because there's so much value in kindness, and sometimes it's underrated. But if we can kind of reinforce that in the next generations coming up, it's going to be a natural habit that just happens and stays and doesn't get washed away by stress or I'm too busy or anything else.
Yeah, and I learned something about something like kindness or other stuff like that as well. And they say that you cannot give to others what you don't give to yourself. So whether it's time or kindness or compassion or humanity or space or attention or any of these things, until you give it to yourself willingly, without guilt or judgment, well, then you can't actually give it to other people. So actually, the best place to start with any of that kind of stuff is actually with yourself. So
yeah, it's an important
challenge
message to remember.
accepted.
Important thing to remember. We all often forget it.
Yeah, 100%. So when you look at that journey over the last, it's probably nearly 10 years then, that kind of full cycle. When you return home, and again, this is following the hero's journey, it's so deliberate. When you return home, how do you show up now differently? So who is Nadia now versus Nadia then?
Nadia now is, I like to say this, I'm that person that I wish that I had. And I'm not perfect at all. I'm still learning a lot of things and make a lot of mistakes. But I'm that person that I wish came to visit my school to just open the floor for a conversation or to answer a message online or to say thank you. It's one thing that anyone messages me online, I always reply. And someone commented on it one time, on a podcast. It was a pageant podcast, and they're like, "Yeah, you always reply to your messages." I was like, "How do you know that?" But then I was like, "Well, yeah, obviously, someone's taking the time to send you a nice message, you reply and you say thank you, and you hope they're having a good day." And he found it very strange. It's like, does that not take a lot of time? I was like, sometimes it does, but they're being nice and they're giving me time. So I think that's something that if someone is taking the time to message you, there's a reason behind it, whether it's advice, whether it's just you stand out to them for some reason, then it might mean something for you to send them a message back. So yeah, Nadia home is more confident than I used to be. Still working, I'll be honest, still working on loving myself. I think that's an everyday battle for a lot of people, but I keep trying. And I'm just trying to put some goodness into the world and help where I can.
Nice. What do you think makes people heroes?
Accepting that they have vulnerabilities and using the lessons often from those vulnerabilities to try and show other people that there's strength in them. There is strength in every vulnerability if we're able to kind of utilize it and harness it and not be fearful of it.
Yeah. Anything else?
Just being themselves. Every single person is a superhero. Everyone has the potential to be a superhero and to make a difference. As long as you be yourself, don't try and be like whatever fella or girl you see on Instagram.
Which is all just fake.
Yeah.
Most of it, a lot of it.
No, a lot of it is. And you kind of, I think if you're on there, you have to know why. Like I use Instagram. I love Instagram. But I control what I'm consuming intellectually.
Yeah.
I can control the content that I'm taking in.
Yeah.
And I try and be realistic. If I'm putting out a really glamorous photo of myself, because sometimes I like that and I think it's a cool photo.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to pretend that that's me all the time. I'm also not going to avoid posting something just because I'm in work and I don't have fake eyelashes on and I don't have a glitzy top on, because nobody lives like that all the time.
And is there any questions that you think I should have asked you?
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a secret one for the end.
Yeah. I think just a lot of it's been, I like to acknowledge what you're still working on. It's like nobody's a finished product. Nobody has got it all right. And nobody is just 100% there. There's always something that you're trying to work on yourself as a human. And I think it's important to acknowledge that no matter how it could be, I don't know why Chris Hemsworth came into my head, but it could be Chris Hemsworth. It could be your school teacher.
Because someday we all want to work towards being as cool and handsome and well built and tanky as he is.
But it could be someone of that stature or that level. It could be your school teacher. It could be your parents. It could be your 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Everyone is working on something still, because that's just how life is. And that'll always change and evolve. And once you achieve something else, you'll find something else to work on, or something else that you're trying to achieve for yourself, or I don't know, help yourself to learn. So I think that's important to acknowledge the fact that I always think you're like a work in progress. You're always looking after your mind, because things will unfortunately keep popping up. But as long as you're aware of that, acknowledge it, and you're willing to put a bit of work in and be honest about it, then you're well on the way to kind of helping yourself.
I learned recently that even in nature, as much as I love nature, perfection does not exist in nature. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we try to think, oh, when I'm perfect or when this and all that kind of stuff, It's absolutely in the universe
Mhm.
unattainable.
Never
So
gonna
it's
happen.
this exactly. So we're all work in progress, but that's
Yeah,
the point of being a human. That's why it's so much fun and at times really frustrating.
yeah.
But it's that balance of the two that makes it worth living too.
Perfect would be really stagnant and boring.
Exactly, exactly. Is there any questions you have for me?
What's your work in progress? Maybe that's a big question. You don't need to go too detailed, but
My Oh, it's a good question. My work in progress. So let's do it a little bit riffy, right? Off the
okay.
cuff. I think my work in progress is being bold and ambitious and not seeing that as a bad thing.
Okay.
Because I've worn, I'm not ambitious for anything of this world as like I'm beyond material goods and stuff like that. But I love cars, right?
You're honest about it.
Yeah. So my work in progress is actually playing bigger and having more of an impact while not losing sight that actually I just still want to be able to walk in the forest and be comfortable with that too.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to dance between. And there's days when I retreat
Mhm.
and there's days when I play bigger. And
Mhm.
I think it's just learning the moves between the two. I don't know them yet.
Yeah.
I can help other people. I can see it for other people,
Mhm.
but I'm learning it for myself.
Yeah.
And I think I want to be the type of person that can afford, for example, brand new supercar.
Mhm.
And if somebody said to me, can I have it? I'd be able to give it away to them. So I want to be able to achieve that
Mhm.
and be the type of person that could give it away.
Yeah. Achieve
That's my,
that material goal, because material goals are fine too.
yeah,
Achieve that, but keep your views, personality, morals, compass where it's at.
yes.
Yeah. That's a
That's,
good
I
one.
think, the work in progress. And just
That's
to
a
kind
good
of
one.
impact and, like you say, put a bit more goodness into the world. I don't
Mhm.
know yet what that is for me, but I'm trying to work
Mhm.
towards it.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Because the balance is always hard. And looking at it for other people, you're like, oh, it's clear how you can do that.
Yeah, please stop doing that.
Literally, but it gets so messy in your own head trying to get that
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah.
And you're gonna slip up doing both ways. You're gonna overcorrect it and undercorrect it until you find the perfect mix.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's just being around people that understand that
Exactly.
and allow
So
space for that.
exactly. So I wrote down earlier on, I do a live every Monday in two
Mhm.
Facebook groups. And one of the things that I talked about was what worldviews do you surround yourself with, but
Mhm.
also what worldview do you surround yourself with too?
Okay.
So what we think is possible, we hold on to for ourselves, but also the people that we interact with can also hold that worldview of what we think is possible as well. So the limitations rather than possibilities.
Okay.
So that's what I'm trying to pay attention to as well.
Yeah.
What am I believing to be true, but
Mhm.
also who am I surrounding myself with that also kind of can limit what you think is true.
Yes. Who your influence is around you because it's inevitably gonna rub off.
Yes,
So it's
exactly,
making sure that you're staying autonomous in the middle of that.
exactly, exactly. Nadia Sayers, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.